I want to dive into a subject that is absolutely vital and has been hot in, frankly, the media, from every mastermind group that I'm part of, that I run, every speech that I'm giving. And it's this concept around fear and dealing with the fears that are ultimately holding us back in literally every area of life. And it is so key because, one of the reasons I really started Pro Athlete Advantage was to help people when they look back on their deathbeds, hopefully many, many years from now, to look back and actually be proud of the life that they've lived. I want them to look back and have this life of absolutely no regrets, that they took risks, they took chances in their lives, they put themselves out there. And what I have found, you read the studies, you read, interview, people who are kind of close to later years in their life, and there are certain regrets that fill them. And I'm not going to get into those today, but what you often hear is that they didn't take those risks. And the ultimate culprit, like what's causing that, is fear. And it comes across in various formats. It might be a fear of the unknown, a fear of failure, a fear of perhaps what other people might think about you, might say about you. Hey, Courtney, happy to have you join today. But all these different fears, fear of maybe not looking smart, but those are the things that get in our way. So when we go to take that chance, put ourselves out there, do something different than perhaps we've done before, we ultimately have this kind of fear bell go off in our head, which says, hey, this is kind of a risky situation. I don't really know if you want to venture down that route. And this has been the key subject for the past 2 months in the mastermind groups that I run here out of the Denver area. And in particular, with one of these groups, I posed a question, had them reflect on what are some of the biggest fears that they're carrying around with them. Now, I will tell you that, I've had a lot of fears personally going on in my life at different stages. When I played the game of baseball, when I transitioned to the corporate world, when I moved overseas, when I moved back to the United States, when I started this business especially. And for me, one of the big ones that I've always dealt with is a fear of what other people think of me. And I think it's one that a lot of us deal with, right? These perceptions that others have of us, of what are they going to say, what are they going to think, what are they going to tell their friends, based on whatever we might do, whether we are successful, whether we fail, whether it's somewhere in between. We have this constant worry about, what are others' perception of us? And so for me, that's been a big struggle. Right? I remember when I started this business, when I started Pro Athlete Advantage, I would take a lot of offense to what people would write on social media, or an email back to me, or some post on LinkedIn or Facebook. And I would take this personal offense to it, as if they were somehow attacking me and attacking my character, and perhaps they were, but it was something that when I would read those comments, that it would absolutely derail me. It would take me off my game. It would make me start questioning myself and my abilities, and if I could do it and if I could pull this off. And it started just this whirlwind of questioning of thoughts in my head, which is not where I need to be running a business, right? And that's not where we all need to be. And it's, interesting when you start diving into this, because everyone's just a little bit different in what those fears are for them. I want to get into some stories today about these fears and how we deal with them, how we can most effectively move past them. Because at the end of the day, we're here to accomplish great things on this earth. We're here to put ourselves out there, to look back on our deathbeds and smile, right? Be proud of the journey that we've been on along the way. And so we've got to learn to start dealing with these fears. And I've been a big student over the past probably couple of years now of the Stoic philosophy. And for those of you who have not heard of Stoicism, I was actually introduced to this by a podcast that I listened to with Tim Ferriss. So a little shout out to Tim Ferriss, a little hashtag Tim Ferriss, I guess, hashtag 4-Hour Workweek. And when I was listening to this, he brought up, and the way I summarize Stoic philosophy is that This is like ancient Roman times, right? So you have Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, some of these old time rulers and philosophers. And they were famous for the Stoic philosophy, where you would identify what your fears are, and then you would act them out, right? You would play them out. And the whole focus was that let's see how bad this fear can really be. Let's see how the impact that it's going to make on us. And I found this absolutely fascinating, because one of the famous things that they would do, and shout out to Shauna, hey Shauna, but one of the famous things that they would do was, at least once a year, they would assume that they lost everything, right? So our fear of losing everything, right? If we lost our job, if we went bankrupt in our business, if we lost everything, they would actually act that out. And so at least once a year, for 3 straight days, they would wear their worst clothes. They would only eat beans and rice, because they would assume they have enough money for beans and rice to eat. And they would sleep on the floor. And the actual literal translation is sleep in the dog basket. So we do that for 3 straight days. And then they'd get up at the end of those 3 days, and they would reflect upon it. And what they came down to was like, well, listen, if I lost everything and I still had a pair of clothes, I could eat rice and beans, and I had a floor to sleep on, and I'm still alive, I'm still breathing, I'm okay, then what am I worried about, right? It would release them from being scared of that thing that was holding them back. So in their kind of businesses and what they did on a daily basis, it would release them to go do more, to take a little bit more risk than they did the day before. And so they would implement this Stoic philosophy. And I just find that so very interesting. I mean, when I work with clients in certain situations, I'll have them do things to get them out of their comfort zone. And it's ultimately a fear-based situation that we're dealing with, that we've got to expose it. One of the famous stories I read was this boxer who just was really worried about what other people thought of him, right? And it was really interesting. The person he was working with actually made him go wear this like ridiculous like fishnet top with these tight short shorts, and he had to go into this very crowded cafeteria and eat lunch by himself with no smartphone, no iPhone, no Droid. He had to sit there and just eat his lunch. And of course, people are looking at him, and people are probably judging him. But when he left there and went back, there was absolutely zero impact on him, right? So it starts to free him up to, why do I worry so much about what people think, what people say? Because really, at the end of the day, it has no impact whatsoever. So if you are, curious about this Stoic philosophy, one book that I have that you can pick up is called The Daily Stoic. And it's like it sounds, 365 days of this Stoic philosophy introduced in a really bite-sized chunks, and then I have some reflection of kind of what it means. And it's just a fascinating book to read, and then think about your life as it pertains to these fears. How can you act them out? One thing that we do in my squads is one of the most uncomfortable things that I've had my squad members, my mastermind group members do was actually Zumba. How many there, you can write in the comments if you want to. I wonder how many of you have done Zumba in your life. For a group of males in particular, which is in one of my mastermind groups, Zumba can be an uncomfortable thing, especially when you're doing it out right in front of Coors Field, which is where the Colorado Rockies play baseball here in Denver, right in front of Coors Field with traffic going by, and you're doing out these crazy dance moves. You want to talk about something that gets out of your comfort zone, where you can't worry about what other people think of you. You try Zumba in a public place. It's pretty amazing. But as we got back to the room and discussed, like, well, how did you guys like it? And what did you think? It was amazing to hear the comments about how this uneasiness when we started Zumba that day, it turned into almost this game at the end. So when we started caring about what people thought about us, we had to deal with and internalize that and figure out a way to push through that, where it actually became a game and fun at the end. And you know what? We didn't care. So that's what this Stoic philosophy is about. And that's what this whole fear thing is about. Now, we're a few minutes in now. For those of you just joining us, I am diving into this topic around fear and how we start pushing through and getting out of our own way and dealing with those things that are holding us back. I just covered the Stoic philosophy. We dove into that a little bit. Check out the Daily Stoic for those of you interested. But I want to share a couple stories with you. The first is, I shared a little bit of my story, but when I made the transition from the corporate world into an entrepreneurial role, starting Pro Athlete Advantage 6 years ago, the way I describe it to everyone is that as an entrepreneur, when you start your own business, every morning you wake up, you have just something staring at you in front of your face. It's almost like someone's hand is right in front of your face every day that you wake up. And when I started this business, I really didn't know what that was. And I would constantly find myself, trying to do anything and everything to like look over whatever's blocking me, look under, look to the side, whatever I needed to do to look around that blockage that was in front of my face. Well, what I discovered was that hand in front of my face was every fear, every doubt about myself, every limiting belief I had about myself, every worry, every bit of anxiety was staring at me right in the face every single day. And it was annoying, and it was frustrating, and it was overwhelming all at the same time. And what I discovered quickly was that if I wanted to be successful in this business, if I wanted to, get those speeches, run those workshops, jumpstart those mastermind groups, if I wanted to take on those one-on-one clients, whatever I wanted to do in my business, if I was going to be successful doing that, I had to learn to deal with those fears, those doubts, those worries, those feelings of overwhelm. I had to decide quickly that I needed to look at them dead on. I needed to stare right at them and figure out what those things were before I could move past them, before I could build some sort of action plan to get where I wanted to go in my business and in my life. The same thing is true in our marriages, in other relationships that we have, and dealing with our finances. We have some of these fears behind the scenes that if we choose to ignore them, if we choose to push them away, if we choose to push them down, to hide them, at some point, they're going to become a pretty big problem. So for me, I had this enormous fear of failure and what other people thought of me when I started this business. I remember one of my supposed friends that I told that I was going to start this business before I did. I told him I was going to do speeches and do all this stuff. And do you know what his comment to me was? He said, and I quote, "Who would want to listen to you?" Now, for those of you who just heard that, you're probably like, oh, ouch. And yes, ouch. It hurt because I was about to take this massive leap, scared already. And now one of my supposed friends says that to me. You want to talk about something that scared me even more and that had me go through and start reanalyzing my self-worth and if I could actually pull this off? Amazing when you think about it, right? So that right there scared me. I knew that I was dealing with some self-doubt issues. My classic way to deal with that in the past, right, this fear of failure, because imagine you understand that I have to make sales in my business, right? I have to close deals, right? I've got to get clients. I've got to close speeches. I've got to have cash come in the door, right? It's just part of business, right? I like to eat. My family likes to eat. So I've got to do that. But I had this massive amount of fear of failure that I was dealing with. And because I have to close deals, sales is a big part of my business. But do you know what the last thing I would look at was? Yeah, my sales figures. I was scared to look at my sales figures, to look at, what was in the funnel, right? How many calls I was making, how many LinkedIn messages, how many Facebook messages I'm sending, like to connect with people and sell my services. I was scared to look at that because I knew that it would expose a gap within me, that I perhaps wasn't doing enough or doing the right things. And so I would ignore it. You know what I'd do instead? I would dream up all these different products and services that I could build that people might like and they might enjoy. And I would distract myself with something that was less important. instead of focusing on the thing that was most important in my life and in my business in that case. The same thing can be true of a marriage, right? I can choose to, know that I've got to work on something with my wife. That we've got, something that we really need to dig into. We need to make sure we're on the same page financially, whatever it might be. Maybe we had a fight or something like that. And I can choose to ignore and look at something and distract myself over here. Or if I want to have a great marriage, I can look at the thing that scares me and I can go take action on that. That's where these fears come in. Fears tend to have us either distract ourselves with something else or ignore it altogether. The biggest shift in my business financially, the number of people I got in front of, was the day that I decided to look directly at what was scaring me, to look at those sales numbers, to dedicate myself and become disciplined to looking at them on a daily basis, if not multiple times per day. That's when my business shifted. That's when it absolutely skyrocketed, is when I decided to look at that. Because what I understood was I created this awareness, right? I knew something was off. I decided to analyze it and look at it and be like, why am I feeling that way? Why am I so scared of this? Why am I afraid to pick up the phone and make a call? And then I built an action plan around it. I had this shift in my mindset around what was scaring me most. And for me, what happened, I'll tell you, it was, I don't know what the trigger was. I don't know what it was, but one day I was analyzing that. And I had this kind of epiphany. I said, you know what, man? You're not here to sell. You're not here to sell anything. Matter of fact, that's not your job. Your job is to go share with as many people as you possibly can what you are excited about and the change that you can help people with and how you can help people get out of their own way, and you can help kind of reframe their mind. You can help kind of bust through those fears and doubts and worries because you're doing it yourself. Your job is to go share that excitement, and if they want to be on the train with you and they want to join your efforts and they want you to come in and impact them or their people, then you can talk about how that looks and how you can come in there and make that impact. That shift right there took something that was scary of, I've got to make a sale, got to make a sale, got to make a sale, to I'm just here to share excitement, and I'm on a mission to find my people who understand what I'm trying to do, how I can impact them, and let the chips fall where they may. That was the shift in my business when I finally decided to look at what scared me most. So I wonder for you, if I were to ask you that question of what scares you most, what is your biggest fear? What is that one thing that when you wake up every day is right here? Maybe it's something to do with your finances. Right? Maybe you're scared to look at your bank account and really dig in and really save or make an investment somewhere. Maybe you are sitting there scared to death to scale your business, even though you already know how. You know exactly what you need to do, but you're not doing it. What's that fear? Maybe for you, you have a job and you're in the corporate world, right? And you want to ask for that raise, or you want to go for that promotion, or go for that other job, and something is just holding you back. What is that fear? What is that fear that's holding on to you? We all have them. That's a reality. When I talk about mental toughness, right? When I talk about this mindset, what you have to understand is that we're trying to approach each day as confident, as focused, emotionally in control as we possibly can, with the most amount of energy possible. That's what mental toughness means to me, right? But what you have to understand is that adversity does not go away. Fears, doubts, limiting beliefs, they do not go away. But as you train your mindset, your mental muscle, your mental toughness, whatever you want to call it, that gap of time that it derails you when that adversity shows up, it starts to shrink. And those things that used to hold you back or derail you for 5 days becomes 5 hours. Then it becomes 5 minutes and 5 seconds. That's what we're training towards. That's why this mindset stuff is so important. That's why it's key to start understanding, what are those fears holding us back? Are you scared of the unknown? Are you fearful of not looking smart, of what other people are going to say about you, of success perhaps? What is that thing holding you back? And how do we start analyzing that and asking questions of why is that so? So I want to give you a couple steps that you can implement, that you can actually start applying to start becoming aware of those fears, start analyzing them and seeing for what they truly are, and to start taking action and move through them. But I want to share two other stories with you real quick, because this is the power of doing this. You have to understand the result that can come from this. It's pretty amazing, right? I've experienced it myself, right? And I continue to fight these demons, if you will, these fears on a daily basis, but it is what it is. I'm training myself to react much, much quicker. But I have to tell you about Tony. So I've got this client of mine named Tony. I should have said a different name, but his name's Tony, so I don't know. That is what it is. So Tony is chief administrative officer, if I can talk, at a company. Lots of responsibility. He's been with the company for a few years now, and he called me one day and asked me if I could go to lunch. And he said he needed to talk to me about some career stuff, was thinking of leaving his current role. And I said, absolutely. So we went and met for lunch. And he starts in on, Matt, I got to tell you, I don't feel valued at this company. I've done these massive projects. And he started laying out all these projects that he'd done, which is great, right? And he also, based on the role that he's in, he can actually see salary and bonus information, right? So that's kind of a tough place to be, where you can see what everybody else makes, and then you compare yourself to everyone else in the company. And he said that he could see that he was underpaid compared to some of his peers, right? So tough situation to be in. You don't feel valued. You're getting, paid less than others. And what he said is like, listen, clearly they don't value me, and I'm just gonna, leave and get a new job. And, can you help me put together, a resume or something like that? And I said, okay, so, let's dive in a little bit. And the first question I asked, I said, have you asked the president of the company for a raise? And he paused and said, no. And I asked, why not? And he said, well, he'll probably say no. I've been in this situation in my life. I'm sure you have as well, where you want something beyond where you're at, and you're scared to ask for it. Now, for Tony, I just posed a couple other questions. I said, listen, because you haven't asked this boss, I said, you're assuming that he doesn't value you. You're assuming that he's somehow looking at all this, salary and bonus information, and he is kind of laughing with his evil laugh behind the desk, saying like, oh, I'll never pay Tony what he's worth. And you're assuming all that. What if you assumed on the other side that maybe he didn't have time to look at this? He didn't even know he should be looking for this. And unless you bring it up, you and he are going to be in the dark, and then you're going to leave and take a similar job at a similar salary level and move on, right? And start over, frankly, because starting over to a new company is difficult. So what we did is I asked Tony if he'd go talk to his boss. But before we did that, we actually devised this plan for him, where what he did was he gathered a list of all the projects that he'd done, all the value that he had provided, right? Because what we have to understand is in a business setting, just like a marriage, just like anything else, there's value passing, right? So I'm providing value to people, they're providing value to me. It's this value exchange constantly, right? I want to be providing tremendous value to my wife as she wants to provide tremendous value to me, right? So it's a value exchange. So what Tony did, made a list of all the different projects, and actually wrote down, quantified it, right? What's the value that he had provided? So he made this list, and then he ignored the internal data he could see, and actually went and did some research on what the market said that he should make. Okay, just comparable chief administrative officers. I can't say that word today for some reason, but comparable levels, what they make. And then he set a meeting with the president. He went in and said, hey, boss, I just wanted to kind of show you this information. I'm providing a lot of value. Here's what kind of comps show in the market, and would appreciate a raise. And he actually threw out a number. So boss says, well, let me take a look at this and get back to you. So a couple days later, boss calls him in And what Tony says unfolded, he'll never forget. He was given a $105,000 raise, an 80% increase in his bonus potential, because the boss had no idea that he was that underpaid. As a matter of fact, the number that he asked for was way, way below what he was actually awarded. So you think about this for a minute. Tony was scared to death to go have a conversation with that boss, and rightfully so, right? It's an uncomfortable thing to go talk to this boss, but he had this fear inside him of perhaps that boss not kind of proving to him that he wasn't valued, right? Nobody wants to hear that. So he had this fear of going to talk to that boss for fear that he maybe wasn't really valued. And instead what happened was that boss had just not realized it. Once he saw the data, saw the information, once he lined up the value that Tony provided, he gave him this massive raise. I mean, this is life-changing money. That's Tony's quote, life-changing money, based on one conversation, right? This is diving into these fears and what it can do when you start becoming aware, when you dig in and figure out why you're so scared, and you build an action plan to move past it. Another friend of mine that I've known for, since 7th grade, if you believe that. I hadn't seen him in about 20 years, and we reconnected. He joined one of my mastermind groups. But Mike was very brave at our mastermind group to share his ultimate fear. And it actually started out with a fear of failure. He owns his own business. It's been a rough couple of years, but they're finally coming out the other side. And he had this immense fear of failure. But as we dug in, as we said, no, that can't. I get that, Mike, but he's been a risk taker his whole life. So we dug in, like, why? But why are you scared of failure? Why? We kept asking why. And what it ultimately came back to was that he was afraid that he wouldn't live up to his father's expectations. That's pretty powerful, isn't it? Because there's people all around us, teachers, coaches, friends, wives, husbands, partners, fathers, mothers, uncles, aunts, all these people around us that set certain expectations of us. And Mike had this immense fear that his father would somehow disown him, not talk to him, that would look down upon him if this business failed. And one of the guys on the mastermind group, Brett, actually had this phenomenal suggestion and said, Mike, why don't you go talk to your dad about it? Why don't you tell him that you've got this fear underlying you for some reason, and let's see what he says. Yeah, we had an inkling of what he'd say. And so Mike reported back that it had gone exactly like we all thought, where his father's like, what are you talking about? Like, I support you in everything you do. Like, you're doing amazing things. And whether you're, if you start going down this path of, you don't think it's going to work, like, how can I help you? Right? But you just talked about the pride in his son. So for Mike, and I saw him again this morning, as a matter of fact, and we talked a little bit more about it, but it's been freeing for him, right? Where it stopped being this kind of elephant in the room, or the monkey on his back, that thing that was weighing him down, thinking about, well, what if I fail my dad? What is he going to think about me? To switching this mindset of like, man, my dad really actually believes in me. Like, this is incredible. Wonder what amazing things I can do with this. So it's freeing when you start doing that, when we stop, again, dealing with all those fears that hold us back. So I could go on and on with stories, and looks like Peter and Tyler joined. What's up, fellas? Happy to have you here. You can type in the comments if you all want to type something of where you're calling in from, and would love to kind of hear. But I want to talk through kind of a couple things that you can do to start dealing with these fears. The first is this awareness. And one kind of question you want to ask yourself, and I highly recommend getting a journal, carving out some quiet time, going and really spending some time diving into this. But I want you to ask that simple question of yourself, of looking at different areas of your life. So you can look at your business or career, right? Because I know some of you have a job, a 9-to-5 job, or 8-to-5 job, or 6-to-6 job. I don't know, but you have a job. You have others that are, running your own business. You might be a business owner. You might be starting a business. I want you also to look at different relationships that you have. So perhaps you're married, dating someone. What would that look like? Maybe fitness and nutrition, right? Maybe you have some things to deal with around getting fit. I want you to also think about your finances. And I want you to look at those few areas, and I want you to ask that question of like, what ultimately, as I think about those, what's the first thing that pops into your head when you ask that question? What am I truly scared of in that area? What am I truly scared of? What am I fearful of? If that thing happened, what would truly happen to me and to my family, to my relationship? If something horrible happened with that, what would that thing be? You see, we're starting to go down this Stoic path. And for those of you who joined late, we talked about that Stoic philosophy and diving into that. The Daily Stoic was a book I recommended. But we're starting to analyze what would truly happen if that fear occurred. So for example, if I figured out like I'm going to lose everything, all my money is gone, what would truly happen? What would the end result be? And I want you to dive into that. And then I want you to ask at least 4 times, then what? Because you're going to say, well, if I lost everything, I'd have to move out of my house. Well, then what, Matt? Well, then I'd have to find some place to live. Well, and then what? Well, I'd probably have to call my mom and sister and all these other people. Well, then what? Well, we'd probably move in with them. And then what? Well, I don't know. I'd probably have to go get a new job, right? But what you start uncovering is that what you're fearful of is probably pretty unlikely to result in something horrible for you, right? I think of losing everything, and just like I told you, I walked through my analysis that I did. My mother or my sister would take my whole family in if need be, and they would feed us and they would clothe us. They would, of course, require me to get back on my feet and go get a job and do all this other stuff. So what am I so worried about? What am I so worried about? Losing everything. Why not take that risk? Because if that's the worst that's going to happen, that I still have warm meals and food and clothing and all that stuff, then it starts to free my mind up to like, wow, the possibilities. Why am I letting that thing weigh me down most? So I want you to ask now, then what, about 4 times till you get to truly what can cascade and what can happen. And then I want you to, I don't know, go to your deathbed for a minute, right? Just in your mind. We'll go to transport to our deathbed and pretend you and I are having a conversation. You're on your deathbed, right? I'm still looking good at the age I'm at, and you just have aged really quick. And we're talking about your life and regrets and things that you wish you would have done and stuff like that. And I say, what was your biggest kind of fear, biggest worry? And you tell me what that is. And perhaps that, you lived every day in this fear that you would lose everything. And I would sit there and be like, man, so you didn't do kind of what you wanted. You didn't do those things. You didn't take those risks. And you worried every single day about that? Man, that stinks, right? That's tough. I'm sorry to hear that. You see, when you flip it on the other side and you hear from your deathbed looking back of like, that's the thing that got in your way. Now, it might be a legitimate thing, but most of the time it's like, well, there's something you can do about that. There's some way that you can remove that to keep taking action towards where you want to go. With Mike, I thought about, we talked to him about this of like, you look back on your life and like, man, you worried every day about what, not living up to your dad's expectations. It's like, man, I wish you would have kind of figured out what made you happy and the type of person you wanted to be. That would have been a lot more fun and freeing, wouldn't it have? So there's a couple different perspectives to look at. And then it's about what action can I take? One thing we teach I teach in all my workshops and coaching and mastermind groups is all these different tools that you can then utilize to implement and kind of move past these fears. Once you've figured them out, once you've understood really what the underlying driver is and what the worst case is, right? So one of the classic ones that I wanted to talk to you about, which we talked about at length this morning, was around this self-talk, right? And quieting that voice in your head, because remember, your brain is built to protect you. That's the reality of everything. It's built to protect you. Well, one thing you have to realize is that that spikes that voice. And you know what voice I'm talking about, of like, oh, don't do that, or, oh, that's going to be terrible, or, oh, what would they think of you? That's not something you want to do. Don't put yourself out there. Your brain's just protecting you. But once you finally understand what that underlying fear is, once you see it for the actual size that it is, that it's probably a molehill and not a mountain. It's a saying we say here in the States. It's smaller than you think. The potential is less than you think. Once you see it for what it is, then it's figuring out, what is that one, how can I quiet that voice? Right? How can I quiet that voice in my head? And you know the simplest thing you can do? I'll give you two things. One, you should change your state, right? Which means you stand up and get up out of your seat. Change your physical posture. Get up and move. And then you tell that voice to nicely, or you can use a swear word if you want to shut up, to be quiet, to go away, because you've got some action that you're going to take. You're going to do something differently than you ever have before, and you can tell that voice to be quiet. You have that power inside of you if you choose to use it. Now think about this for a minute, right? When I tell you to stand up out of your seat, that is what you want. It's amazing to me, because it's like charging the field of battle, right? Because I'm going to stand up and go towards what I want. When I listen to the voice in my head and I start getting sad and depressed and down and just feeling bad about myself, your physical stature will actually start to curl in. Your shoulders will start to drop, and you're not going anywhere. And that is a position of weakness. You're not going to win a battle in that weak position, right? So changing your state forces you to take action and move forward. And that, in combination with telling that voice to be quiet, unreal. And if you have to tell that voice to be quiet 1,500 times in 10 seconds, like, then do it. Tell it to be quiet over and over and over again until your voice speaks louder than what's in your head. That you start taking the action that you were meant to take. That you start analyzing what is holding you back and saying, no more. That's what I had to get into, where I had to get into my business. No more. I had had enough of distraction. I had had enough of my business just going okay. I have had enough of my marriage just being okay. I want something better. I want something great. But it starts with me looking at my fears, my self-doubt, my worries, my limiting beliefs, and saying, no more. You can hashtag no more all day long, because you want something better. You can hashtag be quiet voice, because you want something better for yourself. This is what life is about. If you want to get wherever you want to go, if you want to get fit, if you want to lose the weight and keep it off, if you want to have an off-the-hook marriage, right, where people look at you like I don't know, they're just confused by how good your marriage is. If you want your relationship with your kids to be amazing, if you want a great business, you want to 10x your business, 100x your business, if you want to get that job, get that raise you want, it starts with looking right at what's staring, and you know what that is. You know what that is. I guarantee if I were to ask you right now, and I know this is personal, you can type a comment if you want to or not, but you don't have to. But you know what that fear is inside you. And it's time to see it, to put it on a piece of paper, to analyze it and see it for what it truly is. And decide to take action against that. I got to tell you, I love what I do. I love what I do because I get to work on myself on a daily basis, and I get to help others on a daily basis. I mean, what a fabulous combo way I get to spend my day. I absolutely love what I do. I want greatness for you. I want you to look back on your deathbed as well with a huge smile on your face because you knew you put yourself out there, you got uncomfortable, you took the risk, and you found out what potential lied right inside you because it's already there. You just have to flip the switch and turn it on. Fear no more. No more. It's time to do something different.